People who have worked around death, burial, what's your best ghost story? Story 1. I used to be a security guard at a hospital. One night, while doing my rounds, I went into the surgery wing and was walking down a hallway when I saw a doctor looking at the whiteboard where all the scheduled surgeries are written down. I said hello doctor, and kept going. The doctor didn't say anything back, just kept studying the whiteboard. When I got back to the security office, I was telling one of the guys that's been there for years about how I greeted this doctor and he didn't say anything back. I asked if that's the asshole they told me to watch out for. I was asked where I saw him and I said the surgery ward, and he gave me a smirk. He then explained that the surgery ward closes at 9 p.m. and that all patients are moved into the monitoring wards. There should be no one there. He then asked me if this doctor was studying the schedule board. I said yes, and he then told me that I just met Dr. Lewis City. Apparently, some many years ago, one of the surgeons went up to the helipad and jumped off the building. Seems like he never stopped working though. Story 2. Junior doctor on the wards, doing a night shift, called to verify a death. Enter the private bay. It's all a bit grim, slightly gloomy room. Patient is lying there, old man looks peaceful. Start my checks, stethoscope out, no signs of active respiration. No heart sounds. Rub the sternum for a response. None. Time to get closer and check the CNS for any signs of life. I lift the eyelids up, reach for my pen torch, balancing closer to the patient. That's when it happens. The patient lurches forward, his face now inches away from mine. I scream. Nurses rush in and ask what's happened. What was that noise? Why so pale? You look like you've seen a ghost. That's when I realize. I leant in too close and my leg brushed against the bed controls, raising the bed. Nurses couldn't stop laughing as they offered to make me a cup of tea. Story 3. My grandfather was extremely sick in the days leading up to his death. He'd worked with asbestos for all his working life and had an extremely debilitating form as a result of it. He couldn't speak, and he hadn't spoken for a month leading up to his death. He couldn't even communicate. On the day of his death, he looked at my mother and said, "The angel is back." My mother was stunned. She asked what he meant, and he said the angel is back, and this time he wants me to come with him. My mother looked at the corner of the room where he was looking, turned back to him, and said, "Dad, there's nobody there." He didn't respond. He died that night. That was 20 years ago, and my mother never spoke of it again. She told me the story when I was old enough, just like she told my brothers, but my sister never got to the age where she was old enough. She succumbed to her disease when she was 7, after battling it her entire life. And on the days leading up to her death, she kept speaking about this butterfly who would visit her. My brothers and I would sit with her and nod along. We kind of just thought she'd developed this imaginary friend to help her through what she was struggling with. One day, she shot up and told us the butterfly is back, and he wants me to follow him. I saw my mother's face drop. She'd made the decision not to tell my sister she was dying, and my sister just believed she was going through a rough patch like she often did, not that the doctors had told my mother it was terminal. But my sister said, in the next second, "I'm going to die, aren't I?" That's what the butterfly said. He told me I'm going to die. My mother admitted to her that, yes, she was going to die. She said though, "Okay." Then laid down and died, with my brothers, my mum and I cuddling her in bed. I don't know what I believe about the afterlife, but I have to think there must be one. That there's some truth behind the legend of the Grim Reaper, that at some point, something comes to lead all of us away from life. Because otherwise, I have no way of coming to terms with what I've experienced. Story 5. Not me, but a colleague found a dead person in a dark smoke-filled burned-out building during the mop-up of fire-fighting operations. As unfortunately happens sometimes, you find them by stepping on them. If they're still intact you kinda bounce off them. If they're fried, you can often crunch them up pretty bad under your heavy boot. Well, this guy stood right on a badly burned corpse's sternum. Crunch, right into the chest cavity. When he tried to pull his foot out it got stuck on the ribs and the body came up at him. Burned up arms flailing about. Took him a few tried with what looked like a zombie stuck on his leg. He needed quite a bit of counseling, poor dude. Story 6. I have several stories from when I worked as a mortuary transport tech. The job was basically transporting the deceased from where they were to where they needed to go. Turns out dead people can have a lot of appointments. One time though I had an experience I've never forgotten. I was dropping someone off at the science donation place. This is when you donate your body to science and they take it from there. So I wheeled in the deceased, unlocked the freezer, and did all my stuff I had to do in there. I placed him on the board, got the lift out, and placed him on the shelf. The interesting thing about the freezer was that most everything, once it's processed, was wrapped in this blue tape type thing. And you could definitely tell what was inside. Legs, hands, feet, etc. Kind of interesting to me at the time. Anyway, I shut the freezer and locked it back up, and started wheeling the gurney back over to the garage door. The science drop-off and processing area was a big L shape, with the freezer off to the larger long portion, and then you turn the corner, and there's desks and filing cabinets and whatnot. I about had a heart attack as I turned the corner, and there is just this guy standing there examining files in the file cabinet. Looked just like you or me. Dressed modernly, but out of place for what people normally wear back there. I stopped and said that he'd have to forgive me, but he almost gave me a heart attack. It didn't look like he heard me at all, or even knew I was there. I should mention this was also about 1 a.m., and I'd never seen anyone at the place this late. So I said, well, sorry if I startled you or anything, and went on about my finishing up stuff. Got the gurney back in the van, closed and locked the large garage door from the inside, all the while this guy is just standing there, staring at an open file in front of him, not paying any attention to me. I had to use the bathroom, so I told him that's where I'd be going and I'd be right back. Again, no response. I thought maybe he's deaf and couldn't hear me. So I went to the bathroom and came back to the garage, and the guy is gone, but the file cabinet is still open. I didn't know where he went, and I hadn't heard anyone walk down the hallway past the bathroom. I checked and made sure everything I was responsible for was still locked, and it was. So I just announced that I was going to be leaving and locking up to set the alarm. No response. And that's what I did, and left. I'm not sure who he was, or is, or what happened. But it was definitely an odd experience and one I still remember perfectly. Story 7. I was once working at a mortuary and had to go pick up a man from the medical examiner's office. When you do that, at least where I'm from, you get a receipt when they release the body to you. The receipt has all of the personal belongings that are with the deceased. When I brought the man back to the office, I opened up the body bag to make sure all the belongings were there and double-checked the receipt. When I opened up the bag, I was stunned to find this dude looked almost exactly like me. He was my age, had similar tattoos in similar spots, had the same long hair I do, even had the same style of jewelry I was wearing. It took me so off guard that I stood there in an existential crisis until the embalmer came in and was like, "Hey man, how's it going? Holy shit, that guy looks like you." It's the only case I've had nightmares about. I'll be the one in the body bag with the deceased man opening me up. Story 9. In mortuary school I had a dream about embalming my dad, but he was still alive. My classmates tried to tell me it was just tissue gas and he wasn't actually alive and get my shit together. Then when I cut him open he gasped a faint "Help me." So then the next day I had to go to lab, my second case ever, and I told my classmates about the dream. We had a chuckle about it and started to work on our body. Old lady had pretty severe arthritis, so when I was breaking the rigor she literally clutched my hand. It's the only time I ever got some serious heebie-fucking-jeebies. I had to step away from her and collect myself for a minute, lol. Story 10. I used to work in a nursing home. The residents in certain rooms would complain about a man in their room at night, but hallucinations are common in the elderly, so it wasn't really noticed. One night I was moping the dining room, which had huge windows overlooking the garden. It was around 1 a.m., so pitch black outside and low lighting inside. I had this horrible feeling of being watched, so looked up and reflected in the window was a man behind me. He had a brown suit in, a bowler hat, and the cruelest look on his face. He grinned and his mouth was too big. This happened in seconds, and when I turned around there was obviously no one there, but I'll never forget that look of evil on his face. I paid more attention to the residents after that, and they'd all seen the same man. He just enjoyed terrorizing people. Story 11. I used to be a driver for a funeral home corporation. Like, drive the hearse and pick up the bodies. Never had anything creepy happen, a few funny things, a few traumatic things. In general it was a chill job. However, I did get incredibly uncomfortable one night picking up a man who died at home. He still had the defibrillator leads on his chest and his eyes were closed, which is unusual because the eyes are always open. He just looked like he was asleep or unconscious. Not rigid or pale or anything. I just had this sinking feeling for about half an hour in traffic that he was going to suddenly gasp and wake up in the body bag. Then it hit me. That would be the coolest thing ever. I'd take him home and he'd be back with his family. So I just kind of drove slowly and turned up some music and sang along and talked to him. When I got him to the funeral home, I left him out of the cooler for about an hour while I did paperwork and played on my phone. When I got another call, I checked on him and his limbs had started to stiffen. I was kind of bummed. I put him in the cooler and went on my next call. Story 12. I used to work on an oncology ward as a nurse. Our side rooms were kept for end-of-life patients on palliative care, and one patient that we had been nursing for a good few weeks died early one morning. Last offices had already been done by the night staff and the patient moved to the hospital morgue, so all that remained was to clear the room of personal belongings and tidy up. I sent a student nurse that I was mentoring at the time to do this whilst I got on with the drug round. The student had known the patient fairly well and was comfortable with this job. About 10 minutes after, a colleague came to me and told me that my student had come flying out of the side room white as a sheet and was sobbing in the staff room. I went to find out what the problem was, and the student told me she had been clearing out sink area in the bathroom, had glanced up and seen the deceased patient reflected in the mirror looking at her over her shoulder. My student was a sensible girl, not given to hysterics, but for the remainder of her placement on that ward she would not go near that side room. Story 13. My grandfather died a while back. One day me and a bunch of my cousins were playing in the front yard, rural area, since on weekends all the family likes to hang out together. So we're out having fun and see Lolo, grandfather, walking towards the house. We all greet him and he smiles at us as he walks up the porch into the house and hangs his hat by the door. We continue playing until we hear crying from the inside of the house and my uncle driving fast up the driveway. We all rush in to see what's going on and see everybody bunched up in the kitchen crying, telling us that Lolo died early that morning and they just found out. He lives a few towns away. We looked at each other and told the grown-ups no, we just saw him come into the house. They didn't believe us and we told them that he really did not that long ago, and he even hung up his hat by the door. So everybody rushed to the door and his hat was hanging right where we said it was. He doesn't ever go anywhere without that hat. So me and my cousins are running all over the house calling for him while our parents are so quiet and freaking out. He actually did die earlier that morning and my grandmother couldn't find his hat anywhere in their house. We left the hat where it was and nobody ever touched it. Story 14. I know this story. Few police officers went to the door of the 4th floor unit. They were sure that the stench came from inside it. One of the veteran officers was certain that it was the smell of decomposition. They knocked on the door loudly but no one responded. Yet amidst the stench, they could catch a whiff of freshly cooked rice and Chinese sausages. The police knew there must be someone inside the home, so they kept knocking. Eventually, a 6 or 7-year-old girl answered, and the stench in the house overwhelmed an officer so much that he vomited. Another officer asked the girl if there were any adults at home and she replied, "Mum's not feeling well, she's resting in her room." The girl let the 2 officers in, and they saw the blackened, decomposing corpse of a woman on a bed. There were 2 girls in the home. Besides the one who opened the door, a younger girl was there doing her homework. The 2 didn't seem bothered by the stench or the corpse. The girl added that her mother said she was feeling unwell so they should eat up and go to school by themselves. The officers found freshly steamed Chinese sausage and rice in the kitchen, and asked the girl who made it. The girl said that her mum did and had gone back to her room to rest after cooking it, and the police officers had come not long after that. Upon further investigation, officers found that the two girls and their mother were illegal immigrants who were living in Kowloon walled city, having never left it. The father had long abandoned them, and neighbors said they've never seen the family receive guests or friends. Furthermore, it was unlikely that anyone would dare come by and cook for the two girls without doing something about the corpse and foul odor. Well, that's it for today's video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, leave an emoji of your choice in the comments. You can check out more videos like this onto my channel. I have made this playlist for that. Until next time. Bye.